All right, everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking into a breaking news story. You know, that plane crash in Scottsdale, Arizona? The one with that private jet, owned by Vince Neil from Mötley Crüe.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but before we go any further, I do want to be clear that Vince Neil was not actually on the plane.
Right, yeah. It's not just a celebrity plane crash kind of story, though. I mean, there's a lot more to it than that, a real human element, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, his girlfriend was on board, and the pilot actually died. So, pretty serious stuff.
Definitely, yeah.
So we're going to try to piece everything together. You know, we got news reports and statements from the band on social media and even some legal statements.
Sounds like quite the puzzle.
Yeah, that's what we do here. Let's start with the actual crash. We're talking about a Learjet, okay, owned by Vince Neil. This thing veers off the runway at Scottsdale Airport and smashes right into a parked Gulfstream.
No kidding.
Yeah, and there's even footage of it like skidding along the runway before it hits. I mean, just crazy.
Yeah. Wow, I haven't seen that. Yeah, sounds pretty intense.
Yeah. And like we said, the pilot of Neil's plane died, unfortunately. There were two passengers, Rain Andriani, Neil's girlfriend, and her friend, Ashley, both went to the hospital. And Rain actually ended up with like 5 broken ribs.
Oh, man.
Yeah, and they had their pet dogs on the plane too. But thankfully the dogs are okay.
Oh, good. At least there's that.
Yeah. It really makes you think, you know. Behind all the headlines and celebrity stuff, it's real people's lives that are affected.
Definitely. Yeah, you tend to forget that sometimes, don't you?
Yeah, totally. And Vince Neil and Mötley Crüe have actually put out some public statements about all this.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, they went on social media, that X or Twitter, whatever it is these days.
Right.
To share the news and, you know, all that.
Yeah, makes sense.
So they confirmed the pilot's death and that they're going to try and help his family out. So, you know, that's good at least.
Yeah, that's great. It sounds like they were pretty shaken up by it all.
Yeah, seems like it. And Neil's lawyer also released a statement confirming that Neil wasn't on the plane, of course, and thanking the first responders and saying his thoughts are with everyone involved.
It's just an awful situation all around.
Yeah. And of course, anytime there's a plane crash, there's got to be an investigation to find out what happened.
Oh, right, for sure. Yeah.
And the early word is that the Learjet's left main gear might have failed when it was landing. That could explain why it veered off.
Oh, makes sense. Yeah.
But, you know, that's just preliminary.
Yeah.
The FAA is going to do a full investigation. It'll probably be a while before we know for sure.
Right. Makes sense.
I don't know about you, but when I first heard about this, I was like, what happens when landing gear fails? Like, that's got to be scary.
Oh, yeah. For sure. I mean, when you think about it, the landing gear is holding up, like, the entire weight of the plane.
Right.
When it lands. So if even just one of those gears messes up, it can really throw the plane off balance.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine. So in this case,
right,
if it was the left main gear, the Learjet would have, tilted to that side.
Exactly, yeah. And with that sudden shift, the pilot's going to have a really hard time controlling the plane, you know, keeping it on the runway.
So that's why it was skidding like that.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy how something like landing gear, you know, it seems so basic.
Right.
But it can lead to such a huge accident.
It's like if one thing goes wrong, the whole thing can just fall apart.
Yeah, good point. So you mentioned that the FAA is investigating. What exactly are they looking at, you know, when they do these investigations?
Well, they're trying to figure out why the crash happened. Right. So they'll look at everything. Maintenance records for the plane. You know, was it properly maintained? The pilot's experience, even the weather. Like, how was the weather that day?
Right.
So they got to examine the wreckage and the flight data and talk to witnesses, all that.
It's not about blaming anyone then, right?
Yeah, that's right.
It's more about figuring out how to prevent something like this from happening again.
Exactly. Yeah. It's kind of a learning opportunity. You know, maybe they'll find some safety gaps or, you know, things they need to change with the regulations or pilot training or something.
Interesting. And, you know, this plane was owned by a celebrity, right? So I'm wondering if that changes anything for the investigation.
I mean, it definitely brings a lot more attention to it, right? The public is going to be way more interested. But in the end, the FAA has got to stick to the facts. Was the plane well maintained? Were there any problems that should have been fixed? Right. That's what they're focused on.
Yeah, so it's not about Vince Neil himself necessarily. It's more about making sure something like this doesn't happen again.
Exactly. And I mean, you know, even though Vince Neil wasn't on the plane, he is the owner, so he does have a responsibility to make sure everything's up to code.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, if you own a car, you got to make sure it's safe to drive.
Right.
But with a private jet, the stakes are way higher, obviously.
Yeah, definitely. Especially with how popular private air travel has become, The FAA has really got to make sure everything is safe, both for the people on the plane and the people on the ground.
This whole thing has really made me think about private air travel in a different way. It always seems so glamorous, all that luxury and convenience.
Yeah.
But there are definitely risks that come with it.
Oh, yeah. And especially at busy airports like Scottsdale.
Oh, right.
You've got all those planes coming and going. So, yeah, things can get a little hectic.
Scottsdale Airport is really busy, right?
Mm.
Especially when there are big sporting events going on.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we don't know if that played a role in this crash, but it definitely brings up some questions about how they manage all that traffic,
Yeah.
Especially with all those private jets.
Yeah, it's like a balancing act, I guess.
Right.
Between the convenience of flying and the risk that something could go wrong.
Exactly. Yeah.
And, these accidents, they don't happen very often.
Right.
But when they do, it really shows just how dangerous it can be.
It definitely makes you stop and think. Yeah.
And, we've been talking about the pilot, but we can't forget about Rain Andriani and her friend Ashley. I mean, that's got to be traumatic.
Oh, for sure. 5 broken ribs is a serious injury. And then you add in the emotional trauma of surviving a plane crash.
Yeah, that's tough.
It's a lot to deal with, especially, just a few days before Valentine's Day.
Oh, wow. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, that's going to add another layer to it all. I mean, It makes you appreciate how precious life is,
Yeah, no kidding. It's a good reminder for all of us.
Definitely. And, we should acknowledge how Vince Neil has handled all this.
Yeah.
Even though he wasn't there, it's clear that he's really affected by what happened.
Yeah, I mean, he did say he's going to support the pilot's family and his condolences.
Yeah, it shows that he's not just some rock star, He's human and he cares.
Definitely.
And it just goes to show how these things, that they affect so many people. The pilot's family, the people who are working at the airport, the first responders, everyone.
Yeah, good point.
It's a reminder to be kind and understanding, We never know what other people are going through.
Well said. So I guess as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, we should think about what we've learned, what it all means. It's funny, we've been talking about all this, and I keep thinking about those dogs that were on the plane.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it just kind of brings it all home,
Yeah.
Like behind all this, there are real people with families, pets, and everything.
Yeah, for sure. It's easy to forget that when you just see the headlines.
Totally. And for Rena Andriani, she's got those 5 broken ribs, plus the trauma of the crash itself. It's going to be a lot to deal with.
Oh, yeah. I mean, physical injuries are one thing.
Right.
But the emotional and mental stuff can take a lot longer to heal.
Do you think she'll ever, fully recover from something like this?
Well, that's the amazing thing about people. We're pretty resilient, but it's definitely not easy. It takes time, support from loved ones, therapy, all that. And sometimes it helps to talk to other people who have gone through something similar.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
We should all try to be there for people who are going through tough times,
Yeah, totally. Even just listening can make a huge difference.
This whole thing has really made me think about, the bigger picture of private air travel. Like, what can we do to make it safer?
Well, that's what the FAA is looking into, right? But it's also about the pilots and how they're trained.
Yeah.
And making sure the planes are properly maintained and, all the rules and regulations. As technology keeps changing and more people are flying privately, we got to make sure everything is up to date.
It's kind of a constant evolution, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm feeling a lot of things. Sadness for the pilot who died and concern for the people who are hurt. But also, I'm hopeful that something good can come out of this.
I think that's a great way to put it. It's a reminder that life is precious and we should never take it for granted.
Yeah.
And, we're all connected in a way. What happens to one person can affect so many others.
And for everyone listening, maybe this has made you think about your own experiences with air travel or just, how important safety is in everything we do.
Yeah, and if it has, that's great. That's what this show is all about, getting people to think and talk about these things.
Totally. And until next time, thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.